Hello and welcome to the second CF Armed Forces Capita sponsored Conservative Party conference panel event. I'm delighted you can all join us on this, the last evening of conference. And a huge thank you to our panelists for joining us today, where we'll be discussing the sort of general topic, the armed forces and social mobility, which is a key element of Boris Johnson's levelling up agenda. The format for today's event is quite simple. I'm going to introduce the speakers. As we know, Johnny's on a bit of time pressure, so I'm going to kind of cut to the chase. But basically, if you've got a question, please stick it in the chat function and send it publicly. And at the end, we'll kind of collate some of the questions and then ask them out to our panelists, and including Johnny, of course. So on to the panelists. Our first has been a supporter of CF Armed Forces since its inception. After leaving the British Army, Johnny Mercer was selected by the Conservative Party to fight his local seat of Plymouth Moorview and won the seat in 2015. He serves on both House of Commons Defence and Health Select Committees and is also the chair of the All-Party Parliamentary Group for Mental Health. He was re-elected in 2017 with a five-fold increase in his majority, so that just goes to show his campaigning credentials. And obviously, he speaks regularly in the House with a focus on defence, veterans and mental health issues, and was appointed the Minister for Defence People and Veterans in the MOD and the Minister for Veterans Affairs in the Cabinet Office. Our second panellist today is Andy Start. Andy joined Capita in August 2019 as the CEO for Capita Government Services, which is one of the largest strategic suppliers to the UK government. He leads a team of over 10,000 staff who enable clients across the government globally to deliver better outcomes for citizens at lower cost to the taxpayer, crucially. His previous roles are many, but they're included, but not limited to, the Business Unit Director of Airbus Military Space Business, the CEO of the software business IFS Defence, the Managing Director of BAE Systems Avionics, the President of Tactical Radio, and President of Inmarsat Global Government. So he's got plenty of experience, and we're really grateful for him to be joining us today. Our third panelist is Hugh Lewis, MBE. Hugh is the founder and the Chief Executive Officer of the Motivational Preparation College for Training, which is MPCT. Hugh joined the Royal Welsh Fusiliers at the age of 17, probably some time ago now, with whom he served in Northern Ireland, Berlin, Bosnia, Uzbekistan, and Malawi. Hugh completed his military career, reaching the rank of captain. And then after leaving the army, he started MPCT in 1999 and received an MBE for his work with young people in 2001. He's now trained over 20,000 learners aged 16 to 23 across both England and Wales. And the company's operation has expanded to 35 locations across the UK, employing over 153 full-time staff. So as you can tell, we've got a very, very experienced panel with a decent mixture of approaches to the question of social mobility. But we're going to go straight to Johnny now. Johnny, can you give us a few words perhaps about your role and also about your experience with social mobility in the armed forces?
Thank you very much for having me on tonight, and thank you for the opportunity to speak just briefly about my roles. Yeah, I mean, I've been a member of Parliament since 2015. Like you say, I left in 2014. I have had an incredibly fortunate journey. I stood in my local seat, and I won in 15 and 17 and then 19 again, and now I've got you know, the biggest majority anyone's ever had in the seat. And what that means is basically if you work hard on campaigning issues that really matter to people in your constituency, it can be done, and it's a very rewarding experience as well. In terms of the military and my responsibilities in government, so firstly on service personnel, there's a lot going on in that space. You know, under this government, I think you've seen a very deliberate shift from kit and equipment and things like but a real people, and that's, you know, and that comes to being. Okay. Good. So that's
Johnny, I'm sorry to do this. It might be easier if you turn your camera off.
But I'm more than happy to take my role. Where are we? Here we go. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah. Can you hear me now? Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, where did I get to? We've changed the strategic sort of structure of government to make sure that veterans' interests are represented, and that sort of strategic challenge is there around what it's like to be a veteran in the UK in 2020. I think we've made some significant tactical successes on that, but I think the challenge around making a real strategic change around what it means to be a veteran in the UK in 2020 continues. And I hope we'll have a firmer answer on that in the years ahead. But I'm happy to take any questions, James, and answer any queries that anybody may have.
That's very kind. So, Johnny, just as a first one, I get to ask the first question. You announced on Monday the guaranteed interview scheme for civil service personnel exiting the military. It sounds like a really good scheme and gives service leavers an opportunity to continue to serve. Can you talk through the sort of strengths that former military can bring to the table in civil service roles and perhaps also in business as well?
Yeah, hugely. I mean, look, for me, it's always been really clear that when training in the military and so on, you develop a skill set and a very calibrated set of values and an ethos and an attitude towards work that people pay a lot of money for to sort of inculcate into their teams in the civilian environment. And the challenge has always been making sure that that skill set is advertised in the correct way, but also best understood when making a transition over to civilian employment. So we've done a number of schemes around it. I'm clear that the single biggest factor in improving the life chances of a veteran is having a job. And some of the private companies have actually done an incredible job over the years. And I think of people like Barclays and their after program and all the rest of it. I've wanted the civil service to step up for some time. Changing the civil service can be quite challenging at times, but I think this is a significant move. It means that if you apply for one of these jobs in one of these departments and you indicate you're a veteran, you will go through to interview stage and then get a real opportunity to sell yourself and make the most of it. So I think it's exciting, but it's it's another kind of brick in the wall, and there's more to do.
Excellent. So I've had my turn, and I don't suppose Andy or Hugh, would either of you like to ask Johnny a question?
If I can get myself off mute, absolutely. Johnny, can you talk a bit more about the partnership with industry and how you'd like to see industry writ large stepping up to helping with social mobility in the armed forces and more broadly supporting social mobility across the nation?
Yeah, so I think that Andy, thanks for the question. I think that actually the military is one of the greatest exemplars of social mobility you're going to get. If you think about some of the people and the areas we recruit from and what they see in the military in terms of a life chances machine, if you like, throughout their career, I think we've got an amazing story to tell. I don't think we've been particularly good at telling it too much in the past. But look, I think industry has the Armed Forces Covenant and people signing up to that, and the sort of bronze, silver, gold award scheme and things like that. All these things are tools that have improved the offer to veterans, which is light years away from where it was. I still think, people say the best thing you can do to improve your family's life chances or whatever is have a job. I still think the best thing you can do as a young person is join up. And it will accelerate your life chances in whatever you do afterwards. Industry has, there are I know some people will say industry doesn't do enough. I think industry does a good job. I think that for me, it's about introducing rigor to things like the Covenant Award Scheme for employers, the employment recognition scheme, so that actually, if you're going to use that and stick that on your paperwork, it means something. It means it means a tangible thing to veterans in your community who you're looking to represent or help out, whatever it may be. But look, it's, for me, the military remains this huge life chances machine in terms of developing our people. And it's, the vast majority, I mean, we hear the narrative around veterans employment. You've got to remember the vast majority go on to great jobs, greatly enhanced by their service in the military. We just need to make sure that's everybody's experience, and do what we can to tie up the loose ends where appropriate.
And Hugh, I don't know if you wanted to step in, if you've got a question for Johnny.
Yeah, definitely. Johnny, we exclusively employ veterans to teach our young people. And there was a scheme earlier, a few years ago, from soldiers to teachers scheme. Do you think that would be something that could breathe life into that scheme again, and the benefit for education per se?
So in terms of specifically for education, I think what that was doing at the time was trying to address a niche challenge around demand. So for example, we use financial recognition incentives where we've got a challenge around certain trade groups and so on in the military. That was something that existed at the time to get more troops into training. There still are schemes that are available to do that sort of thing. And I hope this civil service scheme that, guarantees an interview. I think, the thing with all this stuff is that you can't really tell anybody to do anything. It's like in the charity sector, you're not telling people to work together and to focus on the veterans. You can't tell people what to do. What you're trying to do is set an example and create an environment where best practice can succeed in these things. And I think I think it's a real opportunity. You think about how we teach our people to train. We basically rely on train the trainer packages and the skills people can bring to the classroom, and it's something I'd like to see more of.
Johnny, we've got a question that's come in from the audience now, from Rob Sherrington, and I'm going to kind of fill it out a bit for him. But he talks about is there a need for a new deal for veterans? And is a system like the system that the US has a possibility here with education and health benefits? Obviously in your role, that's particularly relevant. So I wondered if you could talk to that.
So I think we are building a new deal. I don't think it's a single moment, if you like. I think we're putting together a collection of policies that are really beginning to shift what it means to be a veteran in the United Kingdom. I think when it comes to replicating the United States, I mean, it's often something that's presented to me, but actually, if you get into the detail, there are real challenges with the VA in the United States. It does some amazing work. At the same time, I often hear things like we have a sort of pandemic in suicidal veterans over in the UK, things that aren't true. Whereas in America, they are genuinely dealing with about 18 suicides a day in their veteran community. There are, of course, things we can learn from all of these Five Eyes countries, and that's the whole point of the Office for Veterans Affairs, is pulling together that best practice and creating an environment where collaboration can take place, and where we can actually deliver meaningful change to make people feel like they've got a new deal. There's no good standing up and saying we're giving people a new deal through a veterans rail card and national insurance holidays and civil service interviews and all this other stuff we've done if it doesn't feel like a change for veterans. And that's what I'm focused on at the moment.
Thanks. I've got a question in from Amarine Reza of CFI, and she says what schemes are available for military personnel and ex-military personnel getting on the housing ladder? Obviously, Boris talked a lot about housing in his speech today. If you can
Help to Buy. So yeah, if you Google Help to Buy for military personnel, brilliant scheme. Loads of people have taken it up.
And then we've got one from Ian Bradley, which he sent to me privately, but it's a kind of a negative point, but it's about the greater Lincolnshire area specifically with regards to the Covenant and the council officers who should kind of support the military covenant. And he sort of says that there's not enough man hours going into that. Can you talk about the scheme and how local councils can try and engender the military covenant throughout the local areas?
Yeah, look, the whole stuff around the covenant is going to change, right? Because we came in on a promise to legislate for the Armed Forces Covenant. People think it's legislated for already. This is what I mean about the detail of stuff. The only piece that is legislated for in the covenant is that the Secretary of State needs to go to Parliament once a year and read out a report about how well the covenant's going. That means very little to the guys and girls who are trying to use this to improve their quality of life. What I'm trying to do is to reverse that and put it in the hands of our people so that actually they can hold local authorities and others to account. So in the Armed Forces Bill next year, you will see legislation that will make it illegal for bodies to discriminate against service personnel or their families because of their service. And people will be able to kind of JR that, and will be able to hold local authorities and others to account to make sure that they are not discriminated against because of their service. And I think you will then see a step change in how the covenant is applied in this country.
Thank you for that. We'll go to a question from Sean Taylor, who's a big supporter of CF Armed Forces. He says, good to see you on. Is it time to give COBCO teeth to look at charities? Which I think refers to the large number of military
yes, it is.
charities.
And some of the first money that we got into the OVA went to COBCO. I work hand in glove with them. COBCO is about trying to engender a collaborative environment that meets the needs of veterans. We all know the challenges around military charities. COVID has in some ways accelerated that because of the financial challenges of COVID. So collaboration was kind of a nice word that people wanted to use about a year or two ago. They are now going to have to collaborate in order to survive and focus on what the veterans' needs are. I don't think that's an entirely bad thing. I will make sure that proper programs that charities can bid into and run on behalf of the government are there. So whether it's the complex treatment service, the TILS service, the high intensity service I'm bringing online later this year, you will have three very clear structures there of mental health treatment for veterans in the UK today. There's a space for everybody to operate in that space, and indeed combat stress, so running some of our programs in the Northwest and things like that. That's my responsibility to make sure the structure is there, and I hope that for charities that will then give them the opportunity to plan slightly longer term, win longer contracts, and focus on what they do as much as they're not going to do.
Great, excellent. That all sounds very positive. So thank you for your efforts on that. We've got a question from Donna Gavin. She says, my personal journey is leaving the armed forces and being supported by the veterans community to find the right job for her. And she says, is it time we formally supported and resourced veteran networks more broadly?
So, I mean, we do. We support regimental associations. We fund CTP partnerships. Clearly, and in Donna's, where there is a need, like Donna's talking about, we can do more and we should do more. I'm comfortable that the offer is in a place at the moment where it is good. It's not everything I would want it to be, but I'll tell you now, it's light years away from where it was 15 years ago. And we're always looking as to how we can empower best practice in this space. And you'll see, we've got the 1 year anniversary of the OVA coming up. It's about equalizing your experience across the country, right? Irrespective if you're in the parachute regiment where you've got a good, strong regimental association and employment and so on, you can use that to move on. Some people don't have strong regimental associations. What for them then exists? And that for me is the critical question about how we equalize the experience of leaving the military, whether your local authority believe in the Armed Forces Covenant, whether they don't. Actually, you've served this nation. There are some things that I believe this nation owes you, and that is a fair crack at life after the military. We will ensure through legislation and other matters that exists.
Excellent. I can see from the chat that got another positive response as well. Johnny, you've been under the cosh a bit with the questions. Obviously, we're a bit time limited, so I'm going to ask one that's to every member of the panel, but perhaps you can go first, which is how do we think that COVID will impact social mobility, and how can we address that? Now, obviously, we're going to come at it from a kind of military perspective, but obviously there's a sort of broader context as well.
Yeah, I mean, how's it going to impact social mobility? I think generally things are going to get more constricted and tougher. I think there's no doubt we are in for a pretty tough winter, I think. And that's across the piece, whether it's in veterans care, whether it's in health, whether it's in the economy. But, you know, the Prime Minister in his speech today was really clear that this isn't about rebuilding the world in 2019. This is about using you know, what has happened to develop faster and meet the challenges of being in Britain in 2020. And for me, it's all about social mobility. It's about, you know, it's about how we, you know, that life chances agenda, which is the sort of thing people like me got involved in the Conservative Party for. You know, not all of us are absolutely stark raving mad about Brexit one way or the other. You know, some of us actually believe in other stuff like the life chances agenda. And the fact that actually in some of our poorest communities, like I represent, your life chances should be as good as some of the kids who live around here in Westminster. And what do we need to do to equalise that experience for people? That's the sort of thing that drives me. And I think that is going to be challenging post-COVID as we see a very changing environment. And it's not the kind of, not short term. So we never thought it'd be short term, but we didn't think it would be a permanent change to the economy, the sort of which we're seeing at the moment. So look, it's going to be difficult, but I think as long as we retain that commitment we've had over the last few years, it will see us through.
Great, and then perhaps I can move on to Hugh.
Yeah, thank you. So from our perspective, straight away, obviously we work primarily with young people, 16 to 19. And as COVID was ramping itself up before the lockdown, what we did was cross-train all the staff in head office to make sure that we could still answer the calls of the students if they phoned in or people are applying to come on the course. And I did that myself. And the feedback I had from young people was that they felt that their opportunities going forward had been taken away from them. And there's a recent report come out saying that over 1 million young people will finding that first all-important job very, very, very difficult. So I think it's really important that education carries on. I was at Highbury College in Portsmouth today, and there's a great buzz, great atmosphere there. And you can see that the college is working hard to make sure that the young people are engaged and carrying on with their journey. So I think that element, whatever's going to happen in terms of the lockdowns going forward, really important that education stays firm, because young people will struggle greatly going forward in this environment. And there's also the people on the end of their careers as well, in terms of losing their job because of cutbacks. How are they going to get that next job if they're at the twilight of their career? So those two areas of society, I think, are going to be really challenged by COVID.
Thanks, Hugh, and we'll come on to Andy.
Sorry, James, I'm just going to have to dive off. It's Johnny. The bell's just gone for a vote.
Oh, Roger, Johnny, thank you so much for joining us. I'm so sorry that we didn't get you for the full hour, but I hope you didn't mind that quick fire question round.
No, anytime. Thanks for having me.
Thanks so much for joining us, Johnny. Sorry, Andy.
No problem at all. But let me try and answer the question, which was how do I think COVID's going to affect social mobility? I think from a national perspective, I think clearly COVID is a real challenge for social mobility. It's particularly a challenge for young people because COVID has impacted the jobs and the industries that young people are more prevalent in 2.5 times more than the overall national average. So for young people in particular, and for social mobility, COVID is a real problem. Having said that, what that does mean is that the army, which has always been a fantastic vehicle for social mobility, and happy to talk a bit more about that later, the army and the military writ large is even more attractive. And there is a real opportunity for the job security that the military offers to be seen as a route through for young people like never before. So in support of that, Capita, as the Army's partner for recruitment, for example, door dropped 700,000 addresses in September to make sure people who are maybe thinking of going to college, who are maybe thinking of going off and doing something different, consider the military as a potential route. And I think that creates new life chances that wouldn't have necessarily existed. At the other end of the career, leaving the military, not only is the vehicles that Johnny's talked about, the Armed Forces Covenant, a fantastic vehicle to help. But if one of the things that COVID does do, it has made so many more jobs virtual, and therefore it's created an opportunity for people throughout the country to engage in employment that they wouldn't have otherwise been able to engage with. And people are leaving the military now with fantastic skills. If I speak to the processes within the core military, clearly the military are educating fantastic skills anyway. But over and above that, there's been a real push for making sure that the qualifications that people gain within the military sphere are reusable within the private sector. And so people are not only having a great career in the military, but they're also leaving with skill sets that are really reusable.
Absolutely, yeah. No, I couldn't agree more. Now that the minister's left us, gentlemen, I realised that you didn't get your chance to have your sort of introductory speeches. Would you like to kind of carry on with those, or would you like to continue to field questions? I think it might make sense if you can talk a bit more about your own backgrounds and sort of give your own introductions again now.
Sure.
Thanks. Andy, if you want to.
Are you happy for me to go first as per the original plan? So just a little bit of background on me. So I run the government business for Capita, and that means I've got a team of about 10,000 who work for me directly, and about another 30,000 in the UK who support government and government services in one way, shape, or form. So we're one of the largest strategic suppliers for government, and we run a lot of those critical services, pan-government, that just quietly get on and do their thing. And a key part of that is working with people like the Department of Work and Pensions, helping people into employment, helping disabled people back into work. So there's a real passion within Capita for being socially responsible and supporting social mobility. Within the defence realm, we obviously run the recruiting program with the Army, but we also run a number of other programs across the military, including things like the Defence Fire and Rescue program. So we employ a lot of current military under our structures, but we also employ a lot of ex-military who join us, and as a result of that, we are committed to the Armed Forces Covenant, for example. I also have another hat, which is my voluntary hat, which is to run a big further education college called Mid-Kent College in the southeast of England, and that further education college is not only passionate about social mobility for the people of Kent, but they also run under a PPP program, the artisan training for the Royal Engineers. So one way or another, I'm sort of deeply into this space and passionate about it. And as you can see from the tie, I've also had the great pleasure to go to the Royal College of Defence Studies a couple of years ago. Just a personal anecdote. It is interesting for me that I have two of my friends who came up through the ranks made it to general, and that's pretty interesting. In terms of examples of social mobility, there are very few organisations that can start genuinely at the bottom and see yourselves all the way up to the top. And I think that really emphasises the opportunity that the military presents. And when we seek to try to do the same thing within industry, and certainly one of the greatest pleasures I have in my day job is talking to people who came in as either an apprentice or on a call centre, and have progressed all the way up to senior management. And there are so many examples of people who have done that within our organisation. I guess I've just got 3 points. The first is that social mobility remains an enormous challenge for the UK, and it's one that we have to take really seriously. And as we talked about, in general, COVID has exacerbated that challenge, despite it creating some opportunities. The second point I'd make is that the armed forces is clearly a route to social mobility, and it's becoming increasingly important. And then the final one, which is a parochial one, is the fact that as the Army's recruiting partner, we are really focused and putting a huge amount of energy onto helping social mobility. And we have specific programs that are designed to try and reach those parts of society that otherwise would not engage with the recruiting process. Those who may not have regular access to internet, those who may not have even considered this kind of career opportunity. So we're supporting the Army with really a sustained effort, with a sustained program to try and accelerate social mobility through the military and get more people to really leverage that opportunity. And so far it's been really successful, and I can talk a little bit more of that if you wish through Q&A.
Andy, thank you. Absolutely fascinating. Hugh, over to you.
Yeah, thank you, James. Thank you for the opportunity to be here today. So 21 years ago, we started. It's our 21st birthday. It feels like we're finally growing up as an organization. And the whole aspiration was to support young people who were probably fixed in an area where they wouldn't see the armed forces as a viable proposition for a career opportunity. And as Andy said, the armed forces is the perfect model of social mobility for all the reasons he just said. So 21 years ago, we had the aspiration to support young people to have the self-belief so that they could go forward and actually get that first job, whether it's in the armed forces or whether it's into further education or that very, very difficult first job. And what was really important to us that everybody left with a destination, because what we didn't want to do was build them up, build their self-esteem up, and allowing them to fall back into the negative behavior patterns. So on average, around approximately 60% of our learners are entitled to free school meals. And we know that if you are entitled to free school meals, then your probability of climbing up that social mobility ladder is far removed from somebody who isn't entitled to free school meals. So it's really, really important to us that everybody is able to progress forward. So what's lovely about the job is that a lot of the students keep in touch. So they've gone on to the armed forces, they've gone into the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, and the Royal Marines, and they've kept in touch. And we've seen the benefit of just giving them that step up of coming out of that mire into their understanding that they can achieve and can proceed into something far, far, far more positive. So we see social mobility not just as a cause, but also as a byproduct of everything that we do. And I think education has an awful lot of responsibility in driving that agenda forward. And that's why we're so happy to partner with Capita and also with the armed forces. We have memorandums of understanding with the Army and the Navy and the Royal Marines to share that data. So we're learning from our successes and they're learning from their successes as well. But the ultimate aim is that the young person at the start of that journey is benefiting from that collaboration. So I suppose it's the collaboration that works. The collaboration with Capita works particularly well. The collaboration with the armed forces works particularly well. And by doing that, it becomes seamless, and it's a joined up effect where you have all arms effect, if you like, in making sure that that young person is central to everything. And they then have the very, very best chance of believing in themselves and succeeding. So I suppose it's social mobility is, for me, it's a cause. And of the 150 staff we have working, nowhere near the size of you, Andy, but of the 150 staff they have working for us, 80% veterans. And the reason we employ them is because they've got so much more to give. They've already had a successful career in the Army or the Navy or the Air Force or whatever. And our ambition is that they have a second equally successful career. So their social mobility is important to us as well. So they come out of the forces with a whole bag of talent. I heard Johnny Johnny Mercer talking about the skills that veterans have, and I 100% agree with it. Our business has been built on that for 21 years, and they're able to hone those skills, continue with their own personal education, continue with their own personal development, and empower that knowledge onto the youth of today. And I think it's just a self-fulfilling prophecy in terms of success. So that's my opening gambit, if you like.
Great, and I'm gonna do exactly what I did with the minister, and kind of have the first question. And it's a bit complicated because I'm trying to work out in my mind exactly what we mean when we talk about social mobility. I've got he is now a friend of mine, but he was one of my soldiers who was a lance corporal when we worked together. He rose to the rank of sergeant. He left the military and he is retrained as somebody who fixes, for want of the technical kind of discussion, fixes roads and motorway infrastructure. And we get on very well now. It's been years and years since we worked together, and it's been 5 years since I left the army. And I talked to him about his potential and what he could do. And he says he's very happy working on the roads, doing manual labor. Thank you very much. And then we discuss salaries, and he earns significantly more than I do in what is effectively a sedentary, more kind of consulting research role. And one of the things that I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on is, I'm not sure that social mobility means that every private should become a general. But what it means is that gentleman, my friend Jason, he can make a choice about what he wants to do. And he can do that, I think, better through the leadership courses and the kind of personal development and confidence that a military role has given him. I wondered if you both maybe like to comment on that.
Hugh, I'm going to let you go first, and then I'll
I think, James, that's a great point. What is social mobility? I suppose it's living that own person's, fulfilling their own aspirations, fulfilling their own potential, whatever that is. And I think it's really important that we work on their agenda rather than our own agenda, what we feel social mobility should be for them. But from my perspective, it's about imparting those people with the values and standards, if you like, so they can live their life to the fullest and contribute to our great nation. So they're adding value to the nation, and whether it's building roads or whether it's researching or whether it's teaching or designing or engineering, it doesn't really matter as long as they become productive, positive members of their community and they can add value to that community. And I think that's critical for me as a point. It doesn't matter how far they rise, like you said, it doesn't matter, they're not all going to be generals, but as long as they're living their life to their fullest potential, I suppose. Andy.
So if I can build on that, and I agree completely with the point. If I can build on that with a kind of an example and then a generality. So the example is if you look at an example of the sort of individual that has come through our disengaged community program within Army recruitment. There's a young man who we managed to engage through that program, who tells us that at the age of 16, if he hadn't been turned towards joining the military, he's convinced that he would have ended up dead or in prison, because he'd been brought up in a gang culture. He left school at 15 without being able to read, and his life chances and opportunities seemed to him as extremely limited and extremely narrow. Instead, he joined the military, was engaged through our program. He served in Afghanistan in 2011 with the 29th Commando Royal Artillery, and he graduated from that to go to Sandhurst and was awarded the highest accolade in the Sword of Honor. So, in terms of opening the opportunity for people to see what their potential is the fundamental about life chances. It's about raising sights. If I talk to students in my college who come from, I've got a real mix of socioeconomic backgrounds in the 9,000 students that serve at the college. And of them, about a third will believe that their life chance is to sign on. And the whole objective is about helping them understand that the opportunity ahead of them can be far wider and far broader than what their parents may have experienced. So the generality about life chances for me is about allowing people to see what is possible in this country if only you have the motivation and the aspiration and you seize the opportunity ahead of you. And joining the armed forces is an accelerant to that. It's not the only route, there are many others, but the armed forces is clearly a really helpful one to that.
Excellent. We've got some more questions in, although I've got two that are specific to each of you. So perhaps, Andy, if we take yours first. It's from Sean again. He says, are Capita going to continue to vary the route in to the armed forces? He says, as indeed the computer has learned to say no in the first instance. And then says, wasn't it Paul Manson who reduced the onboarding time from 365 days to 200 days, which is definitely, the lower you can get that number, the better. But I think, yes, the question kind of refers to whether there's going to be a way for people to kind of get into the military, perhaps at a later stage or through different routes.
So yes, and we've been opening up the aperture. Kath, who runs the RPP program, is actually on the call. So I don't know if you're able to. I don't know if we're able to allow Kath to respond with the detail to Sean's question.
I can. Kath, I think, but she's just there. We are. Let's try it, Kath.
Hello. I seem to have a Soldering On Awards background still on from the last Zoom call I was in, so apologies for the background. Hi panel. Hi Sean. So yes, I ran recruitment alongside Paul Manson as the kind of Capita side of the partnership for the last couple of years, and we have reduced the time to hire quite significantly in that time, and we've also started hitting targets in that time. So we hit 100% of the target last year. I'd like the applause, thank you. 100% of the target last year, and this year we are on track to, despite COVID, actually hit the target or extremely close to it. So it's, you know, we're in an extremely good place. A lot of actually the time to hire, quite a lot of the delay relates to a candidate waiting for the particular training space for the trade that they want to go into. So as well as looking at how we improve the process, we've also looked at how we give more flexibility around training spaces jointly with the Army, which has gone well. And actually one of the things we try to do now is to make sure that there's enough flexibility in the process that a candidate can go as fast as they want. So for some people, actually they need to lose half a stone or get a bit fitter or finish their A levels or whatever it might be before they want to start. For others, if they want to go super fast, they can. And someone's gone through in 16 days. That's the record, which we're always trying to beat, but that's the record. So no, we're in a much healthier place, you know, than we were 2-3 years ago, with a much slicker process. I think that's probably enough for me. Thanks.
Thanks, Kath.
Well, that's great. Thank you very much, Kath, and thanks for sending that over, Andy. Hugh, a question for you now. Do you have expansion plans? Obviously, COVID is reducing opportunities and may well cause a kind of economic shock. You know, with more people unemployed, you know, it's the perfect time to try and expand, possibly.
Yeah, no, great question. We were determined to stay open during lockdown for two reasons. One, for the students, and two, for the staff. You know, you don't want ex-soldiers being idle here. So we kept it very, very busy. And in fact, we opened up 2 colleges during that time, and we moved to 2 colleges as well. So we opened up Nottingham and Stoke, and we moved a college to Sunderland and to Catterick as well. And shame Johnny's not on the call anymore, because we're opening up in Plymouth in 2 weeks' time. So the vision statement for the organisation is still to reach out as many young people as we possibly can, but we're doing it as a staged process. So this year, that is the limit of exploitation. Plymouth will be the last one this year, but every year we review the plans and look as far as we possibly can. On the horizon will be Central Birmingham. That's probably the next one after Plymouth.
And so, is that has there been a shift in your plan because of COVID, or was expansion always on the cards because it's going very well?
Expansion has always been on the cards from day one. So we started off with one centre, obviously, and then we built up to 36 now. COVID's made us work. We did pre-COVID, and we thought that the solution would be everything would be online, and everything, all the young people would love to work through the computers. But when I've been traveling around the country, meeting the students in the last few weeks and asking them what they want, because they're all important, they absolutely detest online learning, and they want to be back in the colleges, and they want to be back to real teaching and learning. And you mentioned teaching and learning in our preamble, and that's what they want. So our assumption was incorrect. I'm an old fossil now. My assumption was that they prefer to work through a computer and online, and I was wrong. So we're reviewing how we're going to go forward with that, and it's important that we have that connectivity with the young people, I think. So we're still, yeah.
Sorry, Hugh.
If I can just build on that comment, what I think is really interesting, both in my Capita life, looking at things like disabled students applying for some IT support grants, and also within my college life, looking at some of the disadvantaged students we have. What Hugh has said is absolutely true for a proportion of the population. But one of the things we've gained through COVID is learning that actually a certain proportion of the population, particularly those who are often really struggle, are much more comfortable in the electronic world. So we have seen, particularly in the college environment, particularly those students who are somewhat socially marginalised, really step up performance and feel much more comfortable in a virtual environment. And clearly, for things like providing support to disabled students, the opportunity to provide them with a service on their iPhone is such an enormous blessing compared to having to hold themselves 90 minutes to get a service where they could do where actually you could do it just as well electronically. So I think there's an opportunity from COVID for us to learn the best of the best and recognise that we need to be able to tailor different services to different people because everybody's individual.
Definitely. Just to add, one of the things that we have found is that our productivity has gone up as a workforce, has gone up significantly. And we've had staff that want to come back into head office and work from head office, so we've made arrangements for that because they need that socialization. But overall, the ability to work remotely like this has allowed us to really step up our growth and step up our opportunity to improve the quality of the delivery. So what we're very determined to do is not to go back and default into the old method of delivery. Why drag people right across the country when you can do this? There are times to get people in the same room, but ultimately the first question is, can it be done through electronic means? And I think we've learned an awful lot. So it's been, from my perspective, I know it sounds like an odd statement. We've learned a lot, and we've aimed to make it as a positive learning opportunity as possible.
Hugh, how does, on a more kind of technical note, how does MPCT actually work with the military to kind of integrate your learners into military kind of career streams? So
what we've done is worked closely with all the military to understand what everything from the pinch points, i.e. the critical jobs that they require, through to the actual selection process. So what we've done then is every fortnight, an individual report on the learner goes to the careers centres, and vice versa. So there's a passage of information, and they've tied up the GDRP element there. So the recruiting staff can find out exactly how that young person is performing on a day-by-day basis, for everything from the physical through to the academic, through to the attitudinal and personal qualities element. So that will allow them then to accelerate their application process if required, or delay it if they're not meeting the standards required. So rather than setting up somebody for a fail, they're setting up somebody for success. And that's helped over 4,000 young people get in. It also allows people who are in the application process, you talk about the 200 days and it goes down to 16 days, but there is a group of people there that would possibly drift off to other career opportunities. Or by being in the college, they really are focused about a military career. They're surrounded by ex-military role models who are super positive about their time in the military, and their ambition to join the military just accelerates. Plus their confidence in joining the military accelerates as well, because they know they're meeting the fitness standards and they understand the ethos and the culture far better. So it's a hybrid, if you like. It's a hybrid, and we're passing that baton over from the learner into the armed forces.
Fantastic. That's that's very clear. Andy, I wondered if you could talk a little bit more about how perhaps in business rather than necessarily in the armed forces, for example, Capita, or in any of the sort of executive roles that you've had, the companies that you've worked for, how they try to encourage social mobility, whether that's through role modeling, which Hugh just mentioned, or perhaps, you know, coaching and mentoring, or continuous professional development. You know, what have you seen that works, and also perhaps what have you seen that doesn't work?
So firstly, I have to say, in all of the organisations I've worked for, Capita is probably the most committed to this process, because it is the most coherent and joined up of the businesses that I've worked for in this respect. And that's because we put dedicated people who focus on the social proposition that Capita makes. And that motivation actually comes from the fact that many people who work in Capita have previously worked in public service in one way, shape or form. So we've got doctors and nurses and firefighters and soldiers and local government civil servants, all of whom started their careers with a real ethos of doing something good for society, and that permeates our organisation. How does that come out into practice? Well, firstly, it starts with outreach. So we have a really active outreach program with schools, trying to engage schools across the country, and we partner with charities to allow us to do that, and support the government schemes to help do that. So for example, we're a key part of the UK government Kickstart programme, and you know, for example, I will go out and go into a local inner city school and talk about the career opportunities that are available for people in our kind of business. So the second dynamic is about ensuring access. So that's making sure that the processes we use for recruitment, from the language that we use in advertisements to where we advertise to how we make people available has reach across the country, and the language doesn't put people off. And then to make sure that our sifting process is designed to encourage diversity in all of its respects, socioeconomic diversity, but also racial diversity, gender diversity. It's about making sure the processes support those dynamics. And then finally, of course, it's about making sure that as we recruit, we make sure that people understand the real benefit of having people from a wide variety of backgrounds. We're helped by that, by the fact that as a company, we are distributed across the country. We've got a footprint today in 250 different locations in the UK, and that spreads from the bottom to the top, and that means that there are opportunities for people to access jobs. And if there is a benefit from COVID, it is that once you're in, your ability to step into other things has become so much easier, because you've then got a country's worth of career opportunity. So the fact that we're employing you in Manchester or Sheffield or Leeds does not preclude you from an opportunity that traditionally would have been based in central London.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it is changing work, the workplace. I think for the better. And as you said, you know, although obviously the learners like to have a physical environment, actually productivity kind of in some cases increases when you're in the sort of online world. Gentlemen, I think I'm going to wrap it up there. We haven't had any further questions come in from the chat, which has been very lively. So thank you to all of the audience members who've got involved. And thank you so much to both you, Andy, and you, Hugh, for giving us your individual, but sort of, what's the word? Kind of almost overlapping views on this and on social mobility in the wider kind of context, not just with the armed forces. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you very much to the audience who've attended and asked questions, and of course to Capita, who've sponsored this event and also sponsored our event on Sunday evening. I know many of the members who were there are also here, so thank you for joining us. It's been a really enjoyable evening. If you have any more questions or want further information about CF Armed Forces, please go to our website, which is www.cfarmedforces.org. I think that kind of concludes our meeting. So thank you so much. And hopefully we'll see you again at another CF Armed Forces event soon. Andy, Hugh, thank you so much.
Thank you, James. Really enjoyed it.
Thanks. Good stuff.
Real pleasure.
All right.